Well, this one should have been a long time coming. Peripeteia, a game which I actually find hard to describe, mostly because of its sheer impact on how I will view games from now on. Peripeteia was released by Ninth Exodus, a small Polish developer team comprised of modders and small-time developers. While the team had a few demos on itch.io before, I didn't play it, as I found out about the game by watching a VNN stream of all things, and shortly after downloading the game on Steam, so first things first. I only played the Steam demo. I therefore will not review any of the itch.io Peripeteia versions, so they may differ in quality and stability. Second, this video will be split into 3 parts, each differing from the one before them. First off will be a spoiler-free section. I will mostly go over the narrative as well as the general feel of the game without any spoilers. If you're interested in the game after this point, you should just go on Steam and download it. It's a lot of fun, even if you're not interested into the aesthetics or the scenario. After that, we will go in depth. I will spoil everything I learned throughout the story, the dialogues, as well as information I've seen in the Discord server, which were made by the official developers. This will also probably be the largest portion of the video, as even in this little demo there are a lot of things to unpack and analyze. The third part of this video will go into why I think that Peripeteia could either be a paradigm shift or the hugest failure of this entire generation. There will also be a lot of speculations, theories, and even potential spoilers for the upcoming release. With all that being said, let's go! The first thing you'll probably notice while playing the game is its subpar graphics and jagged architecture. In regards to the architecture, it stems from the fact that the maps were made in Hammer, Valve's Source Engine level editor. A level editor which already makes environments look abandoned and decrepit by default. In regards to the textures, I have to assume that they look so low poly because of 2 reasons. The first one being the obvious choice of art style, that one being of the late 90s and early 2000s gaming. The second reason would probably be that high quality 4K textures would absolutely kill the performance even more than it is doing at this point. The interesting thing concerning Peripeteia in my eyes is also its cyberpunk influences. While we have seen a lot of different cyberpunk topics and games portraying different worlds, I must say I haven't seen this kind of cyberpunk in 2 decades. It's not some shitty cyberpunk neoliberal porno nightmare like in Cyberpunk 2077, but it's also not a everything here. It's basically a representation of an economic boom-like thing, like it is in a lot of Japanese cyberpunk movies, where we get a lot of shining lights and holograms, stuff like that. No, Peripeteia is plagued by rundown buildings, old apartment blocks, and all around a real European aesthetic, which, to be honest, does not really exist. When it exists, it's never this modern. You really just have medieval fantasy, Renaissance Victorian like nobles, or flat out steampunk, which I find quite sad because you can find a lot of interesting motifs and architecture in Europe. So with that, welcome to Cyberpunk Poland. You play as Marie, a cybernetically enhanced super soldier which worked for the government before its eventual collapse and a new government was able to make a power grab. This obviously leaves the country in a weird, unrecognized state between the Second and First World. Well, that might have been a lot of rambling right there, but let me make it more clear and simple. Marie came to the city for one primary reason: an old rumor about a Soviet bunker with a lot of technological wonders which is underneath the city. If Marie is able to find the bunker, she will be able to harness the residing technology and sell it to the highest bidder. So, in short, it's a get-rich-quick scheme. The biggest problem in Marie's way is she has absolutely no clue where the bunker is. And that really is most of what we get at the start of the game in regards to story. Find the bunker and get rich. But the real meat of Peripeteia is its gameplay and world. Marie herself is equipped with a handful of augmentations, these being night vision, bullet time, a cloak mode, enhanced agility, and enhanced strength. Some of these abilities are more useful than others. Night vision is either extremely often used or not at all. At the beginning of the game you will have to use it a lot, because the game is quite dark, but you can actually stop using it once you have the flashlight, which is bound to be somewhere in the level, but even with a flashlight, you'll probably still use night vision for enemy encounters. The second ability, bullet time, is something I personally don't use that often, simply because of my playstyle. But when I use it, it always feels great and quite accelerated. The third ability, cloaking, sure is nice to use, but something that drains energy like there's no tomorrow. It's much more something you use for the utmost emergencies. The fourth ability, enhanced agility, on the other hand, is one of the all-round abilities. Even if it's quite simple, you run faster and jump higher, something which is surprisingly effective, from enemy encounters to simple exploration, shortcuts, or simply getting faster over the map. Enhanced agility is the go-to tool. And at last, enhanced strength, which does not really much. Well, you are able to lift heavier objects like tables, but I really am not able to find a use in it that the simple grab button is not already able to perform. All in all, these are quite a bunch of abilities, and every ability, except for super strength, make the game 10 times more enjoyable and exploration friendlier. Which brings us to the topic of level size. It's huge. But it's not just the size of the levels in regards to their length, but rather their verticality. If it's a shopping mall with you up on some steel beams, a staircase, or even a street battle with a network of elevated walkways, Peripeteia's gameplay rarely only gives you one height level on which you need to fight, but rather gives you the opportunity to fight on different areas of height over the course of a battle. This lets you never feel like you fight against impossible odds or on an unfair bias. Whilst you go down in one hit in most of the cases, as a lot of enemies hold shotguns or fully automatic machine guns, you have a lot of advantages of working with the different heights as well as changing light levels. This change of lighting, for example shooting out a light, can have big implications for a fight. How much energy are you able to deploy and use in exchange for a more flexible way of taking out your enemies? These gameplay features make Peripeteia not only a whole lot different to the usual FPS, but to the gaming landscape as a whole. This subversion of the usual method of elimination and combat are not the only thing to make gameplay different. The gigantic level size is not only for show, but also for you to have multiple ways of getting to your target. For example, let's take a hyperbolic COD level. You would have one straight pathway to your objective, maybe one or two corridors which split open and come together after 30 seconds of running, and that would be it. But it's not all praise and shine, especially when it comes to performance. While the game definitely looks like trash from the aspect of texture quality, it still takes a lot of strain on your GPU. So on my secondary PC, Peri runs on a nice 0.5 frames per second. And on some of my friends' PCs it also runs like trash if their graphics card is too low. So in the end, would I recommend this game? The short answer? Yes. Yes, you should definitely play it, no questions asked. The long one is, what type of person are you? Do you think a video game must have high fidelity graphics, a multiplayer mode, and should be more concerned with giving instant dopamine instead of letting the player earn victory over a fight by planning or sheer skill? Then I'm very sorry, but I think you should rather stick to something more mainstream. But if you're a person who's able to think in a tactical as well as a strategic way, can get enjoyment out of sneaking as well as fast gunplay, and like to also have some quiet and somber moments in his games, then I can just tell you this. This is the game for you. At last, I would also like to mention that this game can sometimes get political, with there being different factions in the game like the PSR, the resurrected Polish government, the Second Union, aka a bunch of foreign agents fighting for the USSR, and the CIA. All of these factions are very fleshed out with their own respective representatives, who are quite interesting once you talk to them. I obviously will not spoil anything in this section, but I can promise you, if you want to see an interesting depiction of all of these factions, neither of them being the obvious good or evil guy in this conflict of ideology-driven madman, then you will definitely get a fair amount of content here. So, just to make it clear again, this will be a spoiler section and I will spoil the hell out of this demo. Every last thing that I find noteworthy will be inside of here. If it's a reference, a secret hallway, an ending, a character, or some kind of Easter egg, I will spoil it. So again, play the demo. It's not that long if you are familiar with these kinds of games. Once you played it, you can easily return to the video. But with that being said, 3, 2, 1, go. The demo starts, and with that we are being thrown into the tutorial level. From the start you will obviously see the bad graphics and, as I said, maybe even a shitty frame rate, but also the first text box. Peripeteia has a lot of texts and conversations. These conversations can range from a simple talking hallway where you are simply told a few basic infos and are then shoved into the mission to complete what is being asked of you. While in other cases they are wild and expensive talking labyrinths with more than a few outcomes and a shit ton of dialogue to flesh out the world. In the case of the tutorial bartender, we simply have a corridor. Even though he tells us a lot about the gunplay and inventory system, he's also willing to exchange a certain keycard from a nearby occupied building for information about the bunker. So off we go. As soon as we are out of the bar, we have a little courtyard area to get a feel for Marie's movement and design. I heard a lot of people criticize her anime-like appearance and that it does not fit into the game, although I have to say that I think that that's the point, but more on that later. After stacking some boxes and climbing an electric pole, we are presented with two options: descend the building or continue over the roof. In our case, we choose to continue over the roofs, as we find an old ex-communist vagabond. If we grabbed some chips at the bar, we would be able to talk to this man. This man was, at least for me, the part where I stopped worrying about Peripeteia and started loving it. Not because of his design, not because of the world around him, at least not to a certain degree, but rather because of what he talked about and how Marie answered. Once you give this man his chips, he thanks you and calls you a comrade. Marie could either leave or ask him to stop calling her a comrade, but instead of now simply asking him for information about the building you're off to, you can ask him about his life, his history, his beliefs, his hopes, and his views of the future. It has nothing to do with the current level which you're playing. It does not even help you get into the building, but it tells you a ton about the world Marie lives in, and about the life before the fall of the Soviet Union. Actually, we will still be able to talk with him about the brick building, which he will reveal to actually be older than one might think, and that there's probably an entrance to it below the pavement. Once we are done talking to him, we continue down the building. There we find a dealer who deals with old weapons as well as opioids. Again, we could either simply ask to see what he sells, or we could ask him about the business and his outlooks on it. Is he at any fault for selling drugs? Is he perpetuating suffering, or is he at least in his eyes justified in what he's doing? A lot of his weapons, if not all of them, have a way too steep price to even acquire by a long shot, so we simply leave. Down at the bottom now, we walk down the hallways of the building complex until we arrive at the boiler room, jump up a few pipes, and we are again on top of the building. A jump across an old abandoned monument which is suspended up in the air, and we are at the brick building. And as it turns out, the occupants are actually not that aggressive. We could simply pay them to get the key card, but we don't have 500 bucks, so we will have to do them a favor. The people who occupy this building want to kill the dealer, as he's in their eyes just another tool for the Second Union, who sells drugs to keep the occupants of the district numb and apathetic to the decrepit life around them. Well, now that I think about it, It's actually a good enough moment as any other to talk about the factions and terminology of Peripeteia, as there are quite a few. The Polish Solidarity Republic, or short PSR, are the new government of cyberpunk Poland. The government formed after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Some, if not most of it, is corrupt and does not really care about their citizens as long as they are not directly in line with the things that they want from them. This could and possibly is the reason why most characters who are not directly part of the PSR call them a bunch of fascists who like to suppress free speech. If they are actually fascists, it's not really made clear in the game. It's mostly just stuff said by people outside PSR. With all that being said, it is also awfully clear that they are head over heels in an invisible war between the Western world and the Second Union. The Second Union is the reformed government of the Soviet Union, but now with more or less landmass. While they got some countries under their control like Afghanistan, they lost others like Germany, Poland or Belarus. Most of their members are also workers for them, so if you see some guy fighting for the Second Union, you could almost definitely say that they are some kind of worker. Most of their commanders and generals are also getting their orders directly from Moscow and are more than oblivious to the way they are getting treated. Bandits are said to roam the city in search for people to kidnap and exploit. Some of them are just thugs. Others are something called spine sellers, who butcher you just to let you work for them to earn back your own body parts. The guys who are actually inhabiting the brick building are separatists. They want to free Poland, free from the control of the PSR or any other foreign entity, but they are even more outmatched than the PSR already is. Sadly, we don't know anything about them. We later get to see an enemy called the Tower PSR, but it is completely unclear what or even if it has any connection to the sewer people. Again, a faction to which we have no connections made in the game, well, besides some in-game weapon descriptions, which are most of the time small jokes. So we could assume that NATO is acting like its real-life counterpart. Completely inhumane, that is. Civilians are not very important right now. One or two walk around in a tutorial level. There are also a few homeless people who have the same eye color as usual civilians, so I guess they could be connected, but I don't know and I could be wrong. It's up in the air. We will talk about them later. Now is not the time. So anyways, we don't really have a choice in this, so off we go to kill the dealer. On our way to him, I'm able to choose a different route to him through an old abandoned warehouse portion of the apartment block. 2 shots and the dealer and the bodyguard are down. After picking up a few health items and a bunch of weapons and guns, we are on our way back, but not before checking what we got. A rifle, a shotgun, and a lot of handguns. Only one problem with that. Well, you see, magazines in Peripeteia are a lot worth. Simply because there aren't a lot around, especially if you found a weapon which you like. Now, back at the brick building, we are finally let in to get the keycard. With the keycard in our pockets, we first off inspect it. Some of the descriptions for the items are informative, others are interesting, and others again are just plain funny. Although there are some items like ammunition which have no description, which I hope gets changed in the future. While descending down the building, we go through an underground pathway into the sewer. There, at the end of the hallway, we find a keypad. I just love the hacking mechanic as it is simply button smashing like in a cheesy 90s movie where they hammer on some keys until they get the result they wanted. It is also a ton of fun. Once inside, we pick up a PDA, which as it turns out has the information the barkeeper had promised us. On our way back, we come across an Orthodox priest who wants us to quickly leave before we cause some unwanted attention, as while his faith is tolerated, it is not looked kindly upon under the PSR. So off we go back to the bartender. As soon as we give him the keycard, he reveals to us some names and information, as well as some general information about the bunker. He tells us to leave by train through the metro, and that he will contact us if he has some work for us in that area again. This of course made me curious, and yes, you can indeed kill him, which gives us a message that we need to look for other clues to find some information on the bunker. But luckily, we already did. So off we go to the metro to end the level, and I couldn't have chosen a better track for that ending even if I wanted to. But there is another. Yes, of course I'm talking about the old playtesting demo, which in my opinion has some ups, but also a lot, and I mean a lot of downs in comparison to the modern tutorial. The alpha tutorial level back then was very plain and simple in comparison to what we have now. It is primarily composed of teaching the player directly what is special about Peripeteia, like the inventory, the ledge grabbing, sneaking, as well as detection, and at last, hacking. I personally am very split on how I should feel about the both of them, as they have their ups and downs. The alpha has the advantage of telling the player directly what he has to do and is way more welcoming than the new tutorial, which lets a lot of my friends struggle with getting into the game. But on the other hand, it's very formulaic, like every other tutorial out there. The new tutorial level feels like you learn things by your own to be prepared for the upcoming level. It does not hold your hand, but rather lets you learn by yourself how each mechanic works. At last, I would also like to mention that both of them look very different, and that while the alpha looks way cleaner and with that more starter friendly, I would still say that the overhaul of the tutorial portion was a smart decision and an improvement to the style, but also to the feeling of the game. And with that being said, let's continue to the It's been 3 months since your arrival in the city. You return to your apartment, a tiny box on the 9th floor of the hotel building. You afford it by performing hit work for the various factions vying for control of the city. You've set up a shooting range in the basement for whenever you need to practice. The computer in your apartment receives information about your next assignment. Once in the level, we have a few options and side activities to perform before heading to our next assignment. I would say we hit the basement first. Down at the shooting range we find a lot of guns. Most of them were of course not before seen in the demo, but are indeed in the game. My favorite is the G3. It is very well hidden in the chasm, but with not that much ammo, which is a shame because it is, in my opinion, one of the most fun weapons to shoot with. On the way back up the stairs there is a graffiti which states "Ja ne Kommunist", which means I'm no communist, or it means "Ja ne Kommunist", which means something like I don't communicate that well, or don't play with me. But there's also a lot of other interpretations like I'm not your neighbor. All of them are fairly fitting, especially the last one, which really packs a punch in the political climate of the Peri universe. Back at the 9th floor of the apartment we can talk to a girl which is just described as hallway weirdo or girl. I very much like the conversation that Marie has with her. It reminds me a lot of these stupid and meaningless conversations that I have with people I know. The conversation on itself is also pretty great. Peri has its weird style where everything is sort of ultra depressing, but in a very realistic tone as to not make it edgy. A conversation about a constantly damaged elevator that just isn't being repaired because the landlord is just too lazy to do it is eventually transformed into a conversation about a conspiracy involving the close door button in elevators, and its relation to real life conspiracy is just great. For Marie and this girl, it is a conspiracy. For us outside of the screen, it is just a known fact that they do nothing, but for them, it's real. And they are really getting worked up about it, with Marie eventually proposing that she should shoot some holes into the nearby wall, just to make the landlord finally do something. Conversations like these really are the stuff that make you feel like you are in a living, breathing world. One that is depressing like no other and with the resolution of 240p, but still enough to get you enticed like in a really good book. Quite sad that this conversation is practically meaningless, as your choice of words does not affect the girl's response. It's irrelevant if you agree with the girl that the elevators are manipulated or if you tell her that she's crazy for believing something like this. Her answer will always be, well, that's how it is for us little people, and off we go to the next prompt. If you just talk with her once, you won't notice, but as I said, the answers and topics are very well chosen, but the meaningful decision is obviously absent. When it comes to the apartment, it by itself should be nothing special when it comes to main character hideouts. It would actually be pretty underwhelming, but wow, these little rooms ooze with atmosphere, like coming home after a rainy day and enjoying some hot chocolate, or these weird nightmares where you're at your grandma's house and it's like 3 AM and the TV is just showing infomercials like it's some personal purgatory because you can't do a goddamn thing. Yeah, exactly like these. But then there's the computer room and oh god. This server wall out of old decrepit computers, the useless screens, the spare keypad, this room is looking like it's been ripped out of one of the later episodes of Serial Experiments Lane. And don't even get me started on the train driving beside your window, shining light into your room. Everything that this apartment may be missing, it's getting back tenfold in atmosphere and representation. But I'm not here for just one apartment, I'm also here for the secret apartment, or just the old apartment. Back then in the old demo there was an old apartment with a different design. Its room was way bigger and it had no outside area, just a skybox. The elevator looked a bit different and there was no basement. and also no stairs, just one floor. Except for that, a lot stayed the same. The hallway window was still in front of your door, the train was still driving besides the window, and the server wall looked nearly identical. I must say I like the floor area, the view outside the window, as well as the look of the elevator a lot more than its current iteration. I just find it more believable to have a house in the middle of the city with the sort of kills that I'm performing. With all the space that is available in the city, I think it would be reasonable to have a nice and overall safe place to stay in the city center, with the buildings on the other side of the skybox looking identical. I feel like I would also live in one of them. Between us, the 10 to 20 lane road, the elevator also looks to be more appropriate. It's way more modern. I dig the elevator design of the Chasm and even the one of Memorial Tower, even though it is still very weird. But why is my apartment block still outfitted with one of these old doorless elevators if I'm living closer to the city center to be more mobile? Why is one of the safest and prosperous areas of the game looking like a second-hand thrift store? Don't misunderstand me. I don't need a mobbed floor. I don't want luxurious items. Hell, I actually prefer the new apartment to the old one, but I feel as if a more modern elevator and the skybox or level structure, which represents the inner city more accurate, would be a much more needed addition to bring back. Regarding the rest of the old apartment, I'm happy they scrapped it. They definitely improved on that one in the new version. Memorial Tower, our first real level. It's hard to know where we should even start. I think talking to the locals is a nice start to the level, and yes, it definitely is. We get insulted a bunch, get told to run off because we Poles make a lot of trouble, and that the barkeeper nearby treats dogs like us, but only because of the money. Okay, maybe you noticed that this guy is maybe not so nice. But even through all the berating and insults, we get a lot of information. First off, the area is controlled by a mobster from Belarus called Jakub Franciszek. He seems to be the local big shot, a politician who only has an interest in his own people. Second, the local bartender is selling stuff, and we could get a lot of leverage when it comes to money, if we would come into possession of some. And third off, that people find Marie more than just weird. It will definitely be a theme that continues throughout the other conversations, but we learn quickly that people aren't that flattered about neither our appearance nor our social skills. This more often than not causes people to tell us to either buzz off, do some work for them, or cause some of the most morbidly funny dialogues in the entire game. Outside of the metro station, we are able to see for the first time how large some of these levels are. Huge skyscrapers whose tops are clouded out by the city smog. The smog does not only keep my PC from exploding, but also looks beautiful. So beautiful that I always miss the firefight between the PSR and Second Union in front of the Lenin statue. The PSR wins 99% of the time, so there's not a lot of stuff I could ask the dead Second Union soldiers. The PSR soldiers, on the other hand, are sometimes very talkative and sometimes don't. It's really a hit or miss. This one is sort of talkative, but as most, he is completely left in the dark when it comes to his purpose as a soldier for the PSR. Most of them are as if not even more clueless about what they're fighting for than we are. This soldier is just directing us to his commander, who is at the local bar in the nearby shopping mall. Without any more clues than what we are given, we ask the commander about the bunker. He himself is not that dimly lit, so he makes us a deal. If we want to hear any details about the bunker that the PSR knows of, especially the ones that the PSR has been poking around at, we would need to have some access to classified information, which luckily the commander is willing to give us in exchange for ending Francisek's life. Sounds like a deal. Only question left is, how do we get into Memorial Tower? The entrance is guarded and climbing up the building would be something only a madman would be doing. So maybe there's a way to slip into the tower by going below it. And astoundingly, there actually is one. We don't actually see games do something like this nowadays. Even back then it was quite rare. Sure, you had your Half-Lives, your Deus Ex, hell, even the OG Fallout had some interesting ways of tackling these alternative pathways, but all of them never had this level of it. These microcosms inside a level, with its own meta storytelling and world building. And here we finally get our first... Ugh, do I hate the sound, but yes, we indeed get our first different enemy type. This so-called topielek is a reference to an old Polish cryptid called the topielek. I like details like this. It makes the machines and language of a certain area we are in feel alive. Giving a deadly machine the name of a deadly folklore creature seems like the weird stuff locals would call such a thing if they neither saw it nor exactly know what they are. Although I'm a bit split on how I should think about this enemy. On the one hand, respect that the creature is actually just a very fast enemy with more health. Most people would say that this would be lazy design, but I disagree. The simple fact that the topielek can be heard because of its distinct and extremely loud sound lets you first off know that it is not only dangerous but also close by. This does not only cause tension, but also a certain feeling of caution. While Marie and her abilities are very effective whilst in the darkness, she is utterly useless when you can see her. She dies very easily and is no threat against the topielek. Couple that with the fact that you can see the body of another topielek, implying that there are more of these creatures around, and you have a player who's in a very certain mood when going throughout the level. This mood being fear. But for now, let's continue throughout the level. Behind a fan, without collision, is the lobby of a shopping mall. It will probably be the first real firefight in a room for parried players. We already know that shooting out light sources is very effective against enemies, and that death can come quickly, but this battle is in my opinion the best introduction to it. A lot of enemies here have quite a varied assortment of weapons. Some have rifles, some have just pistols, and most of them have a SPAS 12, which is in 99% of cases a death sentence. I will probably talk about the enemy weapon layouts more in depth at a later point, but for now I simply choose to shoot out some lights, kill the guards, and take the elevator to the top end. The scenery of an old rundown high-rise building in a smog and rain-filled city paired with a sewer slut song, it's just perfect. I know for anyone not in the in-group of this nihilistic rundown 90s city aesthetic, this might just sound like weird Polish dubstep, but for anyone who is in the know where the influences of Peripeteia came from, this was just hit spot on. The purpose of art is not to make something look just realistic, but also to make it look appealing. Peripeteia is exactly doing that. It mixes the dark and depressing atmosphere with the appeal of the subculture, and is creating a unique atmosphere which I have quite honestly only seen one time, and that was in the intros of a little channel known as Subculture. His intros look exactly like the stuff you would find as an inspiration for Perry. Okay, enough of my rambling, back to the gameplay. Once we arrive at the top floor, we stray a bit through the hallways until we find a way onto the roof and slip our way into Francisc's penthouse, which is swarming with guards. But most of the ways in make it quite easy to just get to the balcony on the second level of the apartment where Francisc is waiting. When speaking to him, he simply tells us that he has no desire in fighting, no desire in resisting his attacker. All he really does is stand there. He knows he's a dead man, and so he just takes it. With that done, we go back to the elevator and it's locked? Why is the elevator locked? Whatever. One fight in the rundown office later and we are free to climb down the facade of the building. The PSR commander congratulates us on taking Francisc out and tells us that there's a weird signal coming from a nuclear district a few miles away and directs us to a superior commander there. Once we arrive at the chasm, we again are without direction. No markers, no hints, just a level we are thrown in. Although there are a few PSR soldiers around that we can ask for directions. One of them not only tells us where we can find the commander and what certain places in the chasm are used for and hold, but he also tells us a lot about him, a lot about why he would be stationed at a small nuclear reactor, why he sides with the PSR and what he plans to do after he's done with his military service. A lot of the other NPCs at the stations have a similar purpose, and this is in my opinion a great feat to accomplish. A lot of games overpopulate the areas with mindless NPCs who are just walking around, or NPCs who just have one and only one purpose. NPCs which seem like a waste of time or just like blackboards. Perry's NPCs might not seem like breathing living people, but they very much seem like people with their own motives and drives. You are able to side with them or disagree with them. You can understand them or be disgusted by their ideas and actions. They have something which a lot of AAA games miss: depth. After quickly acquiring a handy flashlight and killing some homeless people, we are off to the commander. One thing you notice very quickly is that the gameplay of the chasm is very different to Memorial Tower. While Memorial Tower was very lenient in how you could traverse it, the chasm is the exact opposite. There are a lot of different routes, which might not be straight lines, but with enough experience they are obvious enough for you to simply experiment with and find a way to your objective. Once we are at the building complex and talk with the commander, we found out that a group of communists are hiding out in the building and are trying to find some important information in the building. The commander gives us a grenade launcher and a few canisters to go with it. These canisters are filled with tear gas, as he would like us to take a less lethal approach to taking them out. In the room nearby we find a chair rigged with a grenade. It's very basic but still deadly. We take the grenade with us. You never know when you need something like this. A gaping hole lets us easily dispatch of the communists with the tear gas. The rest of them get taken out with more lethal weaponry. So, do you remember when I said that we would talk about the enemy weapons at a later point? Well, later is now. And I have to say, it's crazy how accurate they are with these weapons. In this building alone, there are like 3 to 5 PKM gunners, and these things shred you in half. The rest is luckily equipped with just an SKS, but still, you yourself are not really able to use a PKM effectively. Even if you would evaporate the knockback, you would still find yourself killed within seconds. The only killer gun that I can think of that would be as deadly in the enemy's hands as in your own would be the Spaz 12, as it is basically an instant kill if you're even slightly close to it. The same probably goes for the revolver, but to be honest, no one ever shot me with it, so I wouldn't know. So anyways, once everyone is a corpse, we are finally able to hack the terminal and get the information the commies wanted. So time to get our information from the commander. Well, he just tells us to go back to the station to talk to his commander there. A bit weird, but if you go through the right speech checks, you could get a few more grenade rounds. Back at the station, we get another intermission from a soldier who tells us that the data we stole had something about nuclear plants in it and we need to probe deeper into it by entering the communist hideout and stealing the info right from under their commander's nose. There is also no way around this. No speed check, no question about the info, nothing. Well, not nothing. You can argue with him why you need to do this, but all he counters with is a simple, if you want your money, you better do as we tell you. Well, while we are already at the train station, why not sell some stuff and stock up on some ammo and health items? Again, as stated, most of the characters are not one note, so after asking the shopkeeper about his missing arm, he tells us of a little story of an old friend of his who fought with him in the war. Lost his mind and deserted with a sawed-off tank killer rifle. He not only leaves us with the story, but also the info that he has a bounty on his head and is rumored to be squatting on some buildings in the chasm. With nothing better to do at this point, cause fuck the PSR, we are not going to kill off that guy. Some rooftops later, we actually find him. I won't spoil too much about this encounter, but let me tell you, it is something. It's not only quite emotional, but also again one of these branching path conversations, which can end up in very different ways. It may not impact anything in this area, but it's a very welcomed addition. With this little sidetrack done, we are off to the communist base. Through sheer coincidence, we actually find a way in. How convenient. Once inside, we notice that the place is swarming with soldiers. Obviously, our first instinct would be to simply kill them all, but we can expect better of Perry than this. A little detective work and exploration never hurt in this game, and quite quickly we are able to find a prisoner. A former Leninist who thinks that Dyatlov is just subverting their mission and was actually sent by the Second Union not to free Poland from the PSR and First World, but rather just to drag them back into the Second Union. Whilst the prisoner is sadly very lenient as far as this conversation goes, I have to say that it is very interesting, with him going into full-on denial mode about anything you say. Again, I have to stretch while it is kind of obvious that he does not really know what he is routing for. His arguments are not directly portrayed as wrong. You could go with him in two directions. Either he's an illiterate moron who is following an ideology which is going to betray him either way, or as someone who is in the right but simply does not like Dyatlov and his imperialist actions. Both ways are suitable ways to look at his talking points, but for now only the end is relevant for Marie and us, as he reveals that he stole a PDA from Dyatlov. He is also willing to give it to us, as long as we bust him out of his cell. So one hack terminal later, the doors open and the PDA is ours. It reveals that their plan was to blow up the nuclear reactor and flatten the district. As we have no one to transmit the data to, we just return to the train station. Once we are back at the train station, we are finally able to transmit the data to Commander. Well, I could explain that we could have already transmitted the data back when we had it, but we shouldn't forget that we are in the year 1990X, so yeah, it's actually realistic that we are only able to transmit the data to someone when we have a semi-stable connection, like in the train station. It also makes the gameplay way more clear. The commander introduced himself as Commander Alexei. Now that the plans of the communists infiltrating the reactor have failed, they are simply trying to destroy as much infrastructure as possible, with a bunch of tanks that they've got from some kind of bunker. So again, our goalpost has changed to now fighting tanks at the bottom of the chasm. One elevator ride later and wow, this level is just full of surprises. The first time I played this level, my chin actually dropped. This scenery is breathtaking, the rain is breathtaking, the lighting is breathtaking, and the music. Yeah, enough said. This is true late 90s cyberpunk. Something which I would have never believed to actually see in real life, but instead only in my dreams. And now I see it before me, on this very screen. This fight against the 4 tanks feels like a finale, a grand fight against the odds that seem absurd. There are no places to hide and still we are able to outwit them, either through taking cover, flanking them, or a suicide maneuver of jumping on their backs and hacking them. This moment feels like a real Peripeteia. A point in the story from which on everything changes for our protagonist. We are not the fragile girl anymore, hiding in the shadows from PKM gunners, but instead we are now actively killing tanks. Once it's done, we get our send-offs. The money is transferred to our bank account and we take the train off to our next assignment. Wait. You didn't think this review was over now, did you? I mean, look at the time, we have at least 2 more factions to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into Okay, so we are back at Memorial Tower, but instead of helping the PSR, we are off to help the Second Union. So, one nerve-wracking adventure in the sewers later, and we meet the communist commissar Vaziov, who quickly notices our augmentation and is trying to form a deal with us as he has heard of some rumors in his underground network about the bunker. But he will only help us if we help him in turn. His demands are that we convince Franciszek to support the communist cause. As a lead, he provides us a barkeeper which has some info. So off we are to the bar. Once there, the barkeeper tells us that he only reveals his info once we pay him 1,500 zloty. Well, this ain't gonna happen anytime soon. So back to communist base, we take a service elevator up the building. Once on top, we are free to look around on the roofs. A few pipes and rooftops later, we are able to find a PTSR and some blackmail about a politician and a dead girl in the dumpster. Concerning news for Franciszek. Okay, so now let's tackle this conversation the nice and easy way. And wow, I've seen walls of text, but this was something, I'll tell you that. And Franciszek tells us a lot about what happened in the pictures that we possess. He tells us that the CIA actually drugged him and made him commit these acts while under the influence. Franciszek also tells us a lot of the internal going-ons of the First World, but I will leave those details for you to read and find out. All that we need to know is that the CIA and a lot of other groups use covert tactics to use and abuse important figures in order to control them with blackmail. Franciszek also goes with the demands of the Second Union as he fears the wrath of his own people way more than he fears the spooks. Well, that's a job well done. So back to the commander, but this time we take a more interesting route. We take the elevator and use the bridge between the buildings to get into the office space. Once inside, we do the same thing as in the PSR route. We shoot out a few lights, kill the guards, take one or two things, and leave through the women's bathroom. Behind the maintenance door there is a ventilation shaft which will take us down safely to the bottom of the building, and through another shaft down into a little shop where we are able to loot a battery, a bit of ammo for a gun we didn't pick up, and also a bunch of these handy flashlights which we are able to sell for a bit of extra cash. Once that is done, we can inform Commissar Vaziev that the deed is done, and he informs us that we will work again in the future and the level Wait a minute. Why isn't he saying anything about the chasm or even about the bunker? I know that might be a weird complaint, but isn't it quite important for the story to at least have a hint on where to go? Like, at least any? The PSR commander at least told us of some weird signal coming from there. It wasn't a lot, but at least he told us something. I might get worked up about it, but it's not a good look when I know of people who played the Vaziev path first. What should they think of the game and that it takes them to the chasm? At least give us a line like, "Go to the nuclear district next. There is my comrade Dyatlov. He will brief you on what has to be done." Or, "Go to the nuclear district. He will find all the answers you need there." That is everything you need to know. You can have it ambiguous, but still make sense instead of a lazy send-off like this. So, in spite of that, let's enter the train and drive off to Okay, back at the chasm for round 2. So, since we now know where the communists are hiding, it should be fairly easy to find them. We know that they are somewhere to the right of the chasm, close to the homeless hideout, so that's where we go. After killing the bums, we find Samoyed, a communist which is supposed to keep guard. This is even amplified because his name translates to a Siberian race of dogs. Samoyed tells us that he can't trust us enough to let us in, so we have to do a task for him first. We need to bring him a data package from the other side of the chasm. Well, nothing easier than that. Once there, we kill 2 soldiers and the commander. And we already get a transmission from our comrades. We get a data package transmitted directly to us. Now it's only a matter of getting back to Samoyed. One problem. The entire train station is our mortal enemy now. Well, that might only be a slight hindrance to us. Also, one nice detail is that now that we are enemies with the PSR, the music in the train station changes to the song Oni. I like the vibes of this song way more than Dungright's Shatters. Sorry, but it has to be said. I think that the music of Suicide isn't really able to be topped in regards of atmosphere, especially when it comes to the chasm. Back at Samoyed, we give him the PDA. He lets us in and we can finally talk with, well, sadly only the barkeeper and the commander. Everyone else is just a brainless NPC. I really had hoped for a bit more, but that is sadly a trend with the communist faction. None of them really have any dialogue, except for the commissars. At least some of the PSR soldiers had some interesting buffer dialogue, but these ones? Nope, not one bit. Once on top of the bar, we finally get to talk to Commander Dyatlov. In regards to how bland his soldiers were, he actually has a lot of character. He comments on how his soldiers fought, he comments on your opinion about him, and what your views of the First World are. He obviously relativizes them, but still it is interesting to see a communist portrayed in such a way. Please don't misunderstand me. I really don't like communism, and especially not the people who advocate for it. But as a former communist, I have to say this is way more effective than anything else. Yes, these people might be wrong, but they also might be right. They all have their own views on how the world should be, and you can either side with them or question them in their beliefs and stand against them. Both are valid from a certain point of view, and to have a hardcore communist who actually wants to talk with you about these ideas, but in the end still stays his guard, is very interesting. It's sort of similar like it was with the prisoner from the PSR route. Yeah, he might believe what he's saying wholeheartedly, but it might also just be that he lets you talk yourself out, just to charm you into his poisonous ideology. You cannot forget that Marie is a super soldier mercenary, and that according to the prisoner, Dyatlov is a subvert from the Second Union. So instead of spoon feeding us like we are idiots, Ninth Exodus is letting us decide. Is Dyatlov really faithful in the way that he is letting us badmouth his ideology, or is he trying to indoctrinate us so that we do his dirty work for him? After a talk about the nature of society and blah blah, he finally gives us the free explosives that we should deploy in the free reactor terminals. After deploying the explosives, we should also implant a virus on the top floor and return to the train station, which they will overrun and then escape from. Okay. That sounds like a plan. We can run through a hallway to a broken off building bridge from which we are able to infiltrate the reactor. Once inside, we should be able to appreciate its huge size. The reactor is a huge building. We have multiple floors, hallways, a large staircase, a gigantic cooling tower, and a lot of secret rooms with incredible stashes. The first stash can be found by climbing through the ventilation system and entering a cooling room. A lot of grenade ammo can be found inside there. This certain ventilation shaft also brings us to our first terminal. From now on, it's like a walk-in park. We just jump onto the huge ladder in the middle of the cooling tower and jump to the top. Once there, we use our sword by sticking it into the wall to have a ledge to jump up the steep curve. This also goes for the third and last terminal, with the exception of having to kill 2 guards first. Once they are dead, we just have 4 more rooms to clear. The first one seems to be some kind of large generator room, but I really couldn't tell you what it's actually supposed to be. Maybe a giant dynamo? A turbine? The second room is just a mediary room, but the third one is a huge staircase, which is swarming with soldiers to an absurd level. All of these rooms are fairly easy and leave you with a lot of ammo. To get to the top floor of the reactor, we need to unlock it first. That can be quickly done by hacking a terminal. After doing it like 7 times, I still don't know if I should laugh or just sit in still astonishment that the access code to the most important elevator of the facility simply has the password ASS. We are also able to find a secret weapon on top of the ceiling, a TKB-011 to be exact. Luckily, it is exactly the perfect fit for AK ammunition we have been collecting from all the dead PSR soldiers, so with that we are off to the last room of the whole facility, the control room. It can either be the easiest or the hardest part in the entire game. The soldiers aren't the real problem, it's much more the PSR attack helicopter, which is activated once we have uploaded the virus. The helicopter acts like a tank in many regards. It's able to shoot bullets, but also explosives. Although it seems to have a lot more health, as at least for me, it's eating up bullets without end and really has no regard for the PTSR. At least in my playthroughs, the only thing that really kills it reliably is the grenade launcher. One explosive load of this baby and a chopper goes down like a fly. There's also the possibility of just running away, which is possible because the game sometimes bugs out and refuses to let the chopper follow you, which makes an escape very easy, but sometimes it lets it follow you, which is in 99% of cases a death sentence for you and anyone in a 500 meter radius to you. So after dispatching of the helicopter, we are finally able to go back to the station. One last funny detail is that now that the commies took over the station, the statue of Pilsudski was actually shot down by the dismantled tank from the communist hideout. But with all that being said, we leave with the train to our next assignment. We also get the most impressive ending flight in the entire demo, as we are able to see a giant mushroom cloud in the background going up. The second Union might not have as interesting characters as the PSR has, but it takes the cake in terms of scenery and gameplay focus. It really is like you play a completely different game just by joining a different faction. Oh god, here we go again. We luckily can skip a lot of the introductory parts, but this path is also one of the hardest I've played this far. So how does the CIA route work? Well, it's actually quite simple, but also complicated, because there are a few rules we need to follow. First of all, we need to work for the second Union, as the blackmail is bugged either way for the PSR part. Second off, we are not allowed to die in any way, so no safe scumming. And third off, we need to have 250 bucks. To make it simple, we first need to talk to Vaziov, so that we have the mission. Vaziov is not allowed to die, so we need to kill the Topielek before doing anything of worth. Then we need to get the blackmail. Once we got the blackmail, we need to talk to the bartender and tell him that we are doing independent research. Once that is done, we need to go to Metrohead and purchase a list of old CIA transmission codes. After that, we need to go again up the tower so that we can transmit the code with the blackmail directly into Franzisek's head and make him think that the information was coming from the spooks. And then we need to pray to God that nothing was bugged, as the devs don't update the Steam version, so in the end, it might still be fucked. And then, once that is done, we need to go back to Vaziov and tell him that the deed is done, and only then we can drive to the chasm. So that might seem like a weird rant, but yeah, you need to do all of that and you're not allowed to die. Not even once. You die and you need to redo that again. And best of all, this isn't really a CIA route, as you're just making it seem like it was the CIA. But on the other hand, it was also really interesting and unique that I need to put it into the script. Also, fuck this mission and let's continue to your only real CIA mission. And back for round 3. The way to get the CIA path in the chasm is a bit tricky, to say the least. We have not even one clue on when operative would be, so how about we just talk to a bunch of PSR soldiers. The barkeeper, the girl who apparently is called Tito and hates Western journalists, well, who doesn't? She also claims to be at the train station to work as a propaganda artist. So a strange figure, to say the least, but also one of the few that acts and speaks like Marie. Anyways, we get our stashkin and continue down to the apartment block. We get ourselves the grenade launcher, kill the commander, and no, I'm definitely here just to kill you. Well, what an unexpected turn of events. Getting the PDA shouldn't be that hard to solve, we already know how to get there, and planting a virus in the control room is also not the hardest of tasks to perform. Good that we already know how to get into the power plant, the communist PDA would be just on the way there. Well, the operative said we should keep casualties low, so I assume that simply avoiding a lot of the communists should be the easiest way. Oh, hey, it's that guy. He looks like a communist, but his eyes are a bit different. If we free him, that might be a way to stir up some problems for the communists and have a way to get PDA. Or he flat out has it. Well, nice to know. After a quick hack, he's free and we have the PDA. Onwards to the reactor. We don't need to go through the whole plant just to complete the mission, but I'll still take the extra grenades with me from the closed off cooling room. These are a must. Now we just need to sneak to one of the most populated areas in the entire game, hack a computer in a brightly lit room, and then take one of the 2 elevators up to the control room. Nothing easier than that. Well, to be honest, the first time I played it, I've gone full on peace mode, threw grenades to distract, shot at some walls, jumped a few levels above some soldiers. It really makes the game quite a bit harder. Not impossible, but definitely a different playstyle and a valid one at that. But for my second run, I straight up killed them. Didn't want to have that many problems when extracting myself from the complex. Once on the top floor, we kill a few more soldiers, plant the AXE, and we are found out. Well, not a problem that the grenade launcher isn't able to solve. Now that we only need to get to the grain elevator to deliver the PDA, we can take the same route back through the communist HQ, or we could use the rest of the explosive ammunition to blast the crane, holding a gigantic unfinished walkway, which would cause it to fall down, creating a bridge for us to walk on to get to the steel frame which leads up to the processing plant on top of the grain elevator. Yeah, let's do that. Once on top of the steel frame, we notice that it is completely swarming with bandits. We could either take them out or simply continue to the top. Just this time I avoided killing them. We already left enough casualties as it is. Except for these 2, they have to go. And now finally we get to see Tito? This moment was astounding for me. It was already clear to me that something was wrong with her, but CIA? Never thought of that. The simple build-up to her, standing in that gigantic room, this hall which stretches for hundreds of meters, and there she is. Okay, so back at the station, Tito already had a lot of dialogue, which does definitely excuse her small dialogue tree here. So a lot of the things she is telling us is not just quite interesting, but also laced with a healthy bit of sarcasm, which I always enjoy in characters like her. The things that we get explained from her are not that much, just a bit about the intentions of the US, Tito's views of how the PSR will collapse, and also again a few lines which lets us know how this character sees the world. It's really something which I have to stress. This and moments like these are why I have a lot of trust in Peripeteia. It's not just about the gameplay or soundtrack, it's about the levels. The world that these interesting characters inhabit. In a lot of modern titles, the world just feels like a backdrop to their story. A lot of places feel tacked on. The places like caves, buildings, dungeons feel like they are just there because they have to be there. In Peripeteia, I never feel like this. I always feel like a place is believable, even in such an absurd setting. But here in Peripeteia, I feel different whilst playing it. The levels are in relation way more empty than anywhere else, but it feels human. It feels like these people really live there, from a bum drinking brake fluids to a communist subverter. They all feel like they have a unique view on how to improve an obviously broken system, while also failing in that, by giving into ignorance and self-centered beliefs. The architecture feels human as well, because well, it was made by humans, terrible humans to be exact, but still humans, and so the actions of these individuals match up with the level aesthetics, which leaves very little room for inconsistency. Peripeteia was a real game changer for me. Not only because I have a gaping hole from Cyberpunk 2077 in my heart, oh, I will rip this one a new one day, but also because it made something I wanted to see for years, a game where exploration was encouraged, where the gunplay was laid to rest in favor of a tactical approach, a game where the aesthetic and soundtrack were in tandem. This game is 110% hard, from a team in which I have my full faith that they know what they are doing. I hope that all of you had as much fun while playing Peripeteia as I had. It's an experience which I think will be a once in a lifetime. The next generation will never have the same nostalgia which we are able to find in this game. And I will prophesy that one day we will look back at this game and will fully and without a doubt be astounded on how much this game was ahead of its time. So in regards to time, I would still like to go over a few things before continuing into the next part. First off, a few extra areas which are not found on the fastest route through the factional stories. These areas are little microcosms in their own regards. There's an abandoned, still working factory, an abandoned apartment complex with a handful of rooms, abandoned hideout on the shoreline, a serial experiments lane reference, as well as a few underpasses on the bottom of the chasm, the huge bridge outside the station, and a non-existing elevator on the backside of the grain elevator. All of these places are just dripping with atmosphere and should definitely be visited on second or third playthrough, just by how bizarre and empty they are. They feel like a forgotten out of bounds area in the best way there is. I would also like to mention that I ran from the most southwest point of the map to the most northeast point of the map, and it took me 35 minutes of non-stop running. The visuals are nothing to gawk about, though they definitely have the PS1 aesthetic down to a T. If you're put off by something like this, then this might not be a cup of tea, but if you're able to appreciate or at least tolerate such an art direction, then you're definitely able to have a good time. The music of Peripeteia, I would say, is the same as with the visuals. I guess you have to be really inside the subculture to find an appreciation for the direction that it is going for. If you're a fan of the late 90s PS1 aesthetic and underground culture, then yeah, this soundtrack is for you. But if you're that kind of guy who just wants to listen to generic music that you find on the radio or any Marvel OST, yeah, that might not be the game for you either way. The atmosphere of Peripeteia is astounding. Again, a bit more if you're really part of the subculture that it revolves around, but either way, I really think that they hit the nail on the head with this one. You won't find a lot of variety in the demo when it comes to enemies, which is quite sad to be honest, because we are able to see a few enemy variants in the concept art of the Kickstarter, as well as on their Twitter. I really hope that we get more in the final release, but for now we have to do with the 4 enemy types there are. There are a lot. Sadly, it falls into the trap of the Half-Life 2 beta, where there are a lot of guns which play the same way without any real spin, except for a bit of handling. But still, guns like the Stetchkin, grenade launcher, or especially the APS just make me excited for the final product. They're good, really just good, nothing outstanding, but I think that we sort of forget how good we have it. Peripeteia is inspired by Deus Ex. Deus Ex, one of the best PC games ever made, but really think back to the gunplay, it's hell. So yeah, it will probably be improved, at least in terms of gunplay. The other features like climbing can be a bit wonky, but in all fairness, I have never seen such a precise climbing mechanic in a game that gives the player that much control and realism. Assassin's Creed was basically a hold the right mouse button to climb. Same with Breath of the Wild. Yeah, it's bad. Missions breaking, mission relevant items going missing, lighting that breaks, guns that unload themselves are able to be duplicated by simply loading another save. Basically the whole game is a mess when it comes to the save system. The same goes for geometry and climbing it. it's a bit hard to know when you break the game or if it was actually intended. After 96 hours of playtime, I think I got a good grasp on what is intended or not. But just to be safe, play with the game as you like. But keep in mind that the architecture should probably be broken by the player as an example of immersion. The save system is still shit. I already had a lot to say about it in the review, but here we go. Balance seems to be an interesting thing in Peripeteia. You might start thinking that it is unfair how fast you go down in relation to everyone else, but it is quick to master and quick to learn how the game is intended to be played, if I may say so. I guess it is balanced, but improvements could be made in regards to enemies who use explosives. Interesting and alive, especially the crazy ones who try to defend their batshit insane ideologies. They're not just fun, but really challenge people to think, and I always see that as a good thing, at least in my opinion. I really can't wait to see more in the final product. Short and to the point. Crazy to think that it's actually just a demo. Funny enough, you could actually play the demo and act if it was a complete story. It starts with you wanting to find a bunker to make cash and ends with you getting a job. Obviously, there is more, but the ability to round up story threads smoothly should always be revered. I think it is best described as an inverted learning curve. Most games let you learn a lot from the start and then it gets less and less. Peri is the exact opposite. It lets you learn slowly and then just throws you into the water of the chasm, and from that point on you just get it naturally. I have 96 hours in this demo. Yes, you have a lot of free playability. There are a lot of areas which are not even connected to any of the three main storylines. You have every reason in the world to replay this game. Factions, side characters, weapons, locations, alternative routes. Even I still find new and interesting things while playing. Yeah, there are definitely surprises inside of Peri. If it's an abandoned building full of scavs, a twist about a politician being blackmailed by the CIA, or the first time you get to the bottom of the chasm, there are definitely a lot of surprises and wow moments which will give you goosebumps all over your skin. I definitely could give you a short rundown of what there is in terms of potential for the final game, but instead of just a few sentences, I'd rather give you cut. Okay. To be honest, I never wanted such a cop-out ending. I always envisioned this review by ending it with a huge analysis of all the Peripeteia content released thus far. But sadly, I will not be able to make this portion as I have greatly overestimated this review. Writing, voice recording, and editing for this video were on a whole other level from what I usually did before. So this is why this review took like, wow, 6 months? Really? But yeah, so to cut it short, I would just like to state that the potential of Peripeteia is nearly endless. I will put the part 3 CIA script into the description or a comment thread or something like that, just so that the people who are as much interested in the development of Peripeteia as I am can have a glimpse of what it is like. Peri is a great game, one which had me question what a game can be. At least for me, it is the peak of this genre and will probably be for the next few years, or even decade. The stuff that will be in the final release is crazy, and I really encourage you all to go to the official Peripeteia YouTube channel and watch these screenshot Saturdays yourself. If you want more, you can follow their Twitter or visit their Discord server, where I myself are also a lot of times. At last, I would also like to thank a few people. Special thanks go out to Perfect Human Interface for letting me use this gameplay footage for the Peripeteia Alpha. Well, while in the end I didn't use it as I was able to get my own version, I'm still thankful for his upload, as I would have never known about the pre-revealed build without his video. Second, I would like to thank Softxoxo for letting me use their music as background tracks for this video. Really great music. Also Angus McNevin for also letting me use some of his tracks as background music. I would also like to recommend his website, angusnicknevin.com. Just really great stuff in general. And at last, obviously the developers of Peripeteia for making such a fantastic and outstanding video game. It really means a lot for me that you made this game. I always dreamt of exactly this game. Even want to make a similar game myself. You can see some of the concepts on screen right now, but hey, what's not now can always become a mod for Peripeteia in the future. In regards to what I will do with this channel in the future, I guess we will have to wait and see. I plan to make a video about 3 Half-Life icebergs crammed into one big video, and also a video about Angus Nicknevin and his Terminal 00 website, but that probably won't happen in the near future. But hey, until then, have a great day and